now talking about bush forever. It is a package. It's largely operational by the end of 2012, better late than never. And somewhere between 70 to 90% of the sites, depending on who you talk to, are heading to a final management phase. And that was based on data that the DEC has about 20,000 hectares of 52,000 hectares. There's going to be a 2013 review, and that really should celebrate these achievements as well as the issues, without hiding some of the problems. The actual ability in a time of rapid development and too many people flying out to wherever, it's quite an achievement. The 2000 audit should actually obviously include all sites, and that would mean that places like Brixton Street wetlands, which for an enormous amount of work are now nationally listed, as they should well be, and managed, but places like, who are probably just as important, like Anstey Keene, are not. So we should not lose sight of the fact that the audit, apart from doing the big picture stuff, ought to also do the small picture to look at how we've actually done per site. And that is the true way of assessing somewhere. Not just looking at, as Mary went through, the policies and actions, but actually the individual areas and how well we've done and managed. In conclusion, and for the way ahead, it seems to me that one of the things everybody has said today is that we've got to get better education. Children, for adults, the community, local or regional, whatever it is, we've got to get a better sense of place and the reasons that we want to keep these areas. It's not happening for whatever reasons. It started happening in 1939 and it really hasn't got a lot better. It seems to me, if anything, it's got worse. Our sense of place seems to be more developed towards having a blue swimming pool and, in fact, our children having no proper air to breathe than it rather is to actually have somewhere that we want to keep and manage. We do need, without a doubt, more resourcing for management and education. Rather than building the Queen Elizabeth II Memorial Pond, we really do need some better resourcing for managing our natural environment. We actually also are going to have major issues, and people touched briefly on this, but I think it's true, with coping with and managing some overarching threatening processes. Fragmentation has driven most of these. Most of these are the result of fragmentation and loss of vegetation, giving things like altered hydrology, but also one of the elephants in the room, of course, is driven by our lifestyles, is climate change. If we can't get our act together for that, we are going to ourselves have some major issues, not just our bushland. So urban bushland really needs informed friends and lovers, as Bronwyn said. Rather than it being seen as a place where we can just clear it all and have active recreation and, in fact, cause greater problems for the future. What is the way ahead? Well, obviously, part of it has to be updating and extending bush forever with new data and, in fact, some new legislation. We've heard some part about this with the EPBC. We still don't have a Biodiversity Act in our state, but we do have some nationally significant strategic planning going on in the Peel region. I've been involved with the Commonwealth in the past, and one hopes that the future will be better than the past. Managing regionally significant sites outside the DSC estate, we've heard quite a lot about how there's an awful lot of good work going on in local government, and this certainly needs to continue. And there's some real problems with state agencies which should be doing a better job of managing their bushland sites. Some of them are. I mean, state agencies include things like Kings Park, the BPGMA, and Rottnest, and one would have to assume that they do a pretty good job of their bush. And there's the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth does maintain some very significant areas, and they actually seem to ignore their legislation quite merrily. So maybe it would be a good idea to keep them, actually, to keep the EPBC Act rather than ignoring it. We certainly need to integrate locally significant areas. That's a common theme, and it's very hard to do. It would seem to me that having links, organising keeping our rivers, which are highly significant refugial areas, which most people don't realise. The rivers are our refugia. They are the areas where species which can't cope in other places with changing climate sit
and to maintain themselves, then that's because we have a subdued landscape, and those places have been the places where in the past we've had refugia, and they are incredibly impacted by our activities and by weeds. And the same with wetlands. We've heard some very cogent pleas for what we are going to do with our wetlands, which of course will be greatly impacted by climate change and altered hydrology. Maintaining diversity, lots of people have talked about it, but actually doing it is hard. I think that's the hardest thing of all, is to try and maintain the incredible diversity we've got. We still cannot resurrect or reconstruct bushland. We can't get remotely near bringing back the diversity that we've had. Once it's lost, it's pretty well gone forever. And how we maintain this in a fragmented landscape, to me, as a scientist, is probably one of the great challenges that will face the new generation of biologists and managers. Not me, fortunately. One of the things that worries me about the way ahead, in some ways, was the MOU discussion about the role of the public and the EPA in the clearing and assessment process. It seems to me that there's a bit of a lack of transparency if my department is in fact the person who's going to manage, review and advise and approve. It's a bit like the us being the judge, jury and executioner and the thief. I think this is a bad system. And personally speaking, I've not seen that having one department being responsible for everything and advising another department who then ticks it off is a good thing. I think that's a real worry. I'm also somewhat concerned about the strategic plan focus shift to rare and not the common. I thought we'd actually got beyond this. This focus on rarity is not a way we should be doing. If we focus on rarity, we lose the common. If we lose the common, we may as well give up on the rarity because it will be too late. So there are two things I think are major issues that perhaps should be looked at. I think there is a need for transparency. We all know what happens when there isn't transparency in all sorts of walks of life. And I do think that we should not have a system where there are not separate places to actually assess what we do and judge us. That's pretty well me. This is the motion. I put up the motion. I'm not going to type it again because I can't type very well. I was never a typist. I avoided being in the commercial classes at school. But Mary wanted me to put it in, and since I'm the last speaker, that is the motion, so-called, or whatever you want to call it. I don't really mind what you call it. But I think, while you read that, in just summing up, we've come an awful long way. We do have some major issues to tackle. I think it's really good that there will be a 2013 review of Bush Forever, and I'm sure the Department of Planning, the Ministry for Planning, or whatever they will be called in 2013, would welcome all of you to actually have input to the review. And it would be good if you did, because in fact a review, to be a proper review, does need people to actually talk about it. I do think it should also celebrate where we've come, how far we've come, and how much we have achieved. And in the written paper I've got a few notes about that, about how there's an awful lot of trumpeting about international resource activities in South Africa, but really in terms of delivery, Bush Forever's done far better than the World Bank sort of delivered stuff that's gone on in third world countries, and we did it ourselves. So although we should perhaps beat ourselves occasionally, we should not get too many sackcloths and ashes to actually realise that we've done a pretty good job, but we still have serious problems because we have such a wonderful biota. If we just had a boring biota like Britain, we'd have no problems, but we don't. We have a fantastic biota, one that is world-class in any way, and anybody who says what's world-class about Western Australia, it's our natural environment. And if anybody tells you what's not world-class, it's Britain. So have a look at the motion and see what you think.